Steve Harvey has stood behind the Family Feud podium through thousands of rounds, thousands of families, and thousands of moments that ranged from hilarious to heartwarming. But on a November evening in 2025, a wife did something on his stage that left 200 people in absolute shock and left Steve Harvey standing in the middle of a moment so raw that he said afterward, it was the closest he had ever come to walking off his own show, not because he was angry, because he was so moved by what he had just witnessed that he did not trust himself to speak without breaking down completely. There was a time when a woman who discovered her husband's betrayal would suffer in silence. There was a time when a wife would swallow the truth and carry it alone, because that is what she believed loyalty required. But when Shayla Washington stood at the Family Feud podium and made a decision that no contestant had ever made before, she proved that silence is not loyalty. Silence is a prison. And the moment she broke out of it, in front of the cameras, the audience, and the man who had locked her inside that prison for 2 years, the entire studio understood why some truths have to be spoken out loud, no matter where you are standing when the courage finally arrives. If you believe that no woman should have to carry someone else's lies in silence, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel right now. What Shayla does on this stage, and the way Steve Harvey responds, is one of the most unforgettable moments in television history. Shayla Washington was 35 years old. She was from Tulsa, Oklahoma, the middle child of 5 siblings raised in a 3-bedroom house by her parents, Leon and Marie Washington. Leon was a city bus driver who had driven the same route for 28 years. Marie was a home health aide who spent her days caring for elderly patients in their homes, bathing them, feeding them, and sitting with them through the lonely hours when nobody else came. The Washingtons were not wealthy by any measure, but they were rich in something that money could not buy. They were present. Leon came home from every shift and sat at the dinner table with his family. Marie came home from every patient visit and asked each of her 5 children about their day. They showed up every single day. That was the Washington family's wealth. Marie had a saying that she repeated so often it was practically the family's motto. She would say, "Baby, love is not a feeling. Love is showing up. Anybody can say they love you. The ones who show up when it is hard, when it is boring, when nobody is watching, those are the ones who mean it." Shayla absorbed that lesson deep into the core of who she was. Showing up became her definition of love, her standard for relationships, and ultimately, the measuring stick she would use to evaluate the most important man in her life. Shayla was the caretaker among the siblings. She was the one who braided her younger sister's hair before school. She was the one who helped her older brother study for his GED when he dropped out of high school and decided to go back. She was the one who drove Marie to the doctor when Marie's knees started giving out from years of bending over patients' beds. Shayla took care of people. It was not a job for her. It was her identity. She became a licensed practical nurse at 22 and took a position at a rehabilitation center in Tulsa, working with patients recovering from strokes and surgeries. Her supervisor said Shayla had the rare ability to make patients feel like they were her only priority, even when she had 12 other people to see that shift. She met Brandon Washington at a church picnic when she was 24. Brandon was 27, an HVAC technician who installed and repaired heating and cooling systems for a company that serviced commercial buildings across eastern Oklahoma. He was big, quiet, and reliable. He fixed things. That was how Shayla would describe him later. He fixed the things that were broken, the leaky faucet at her mother's house, the rattling air conditioner at the church, the wobbly shelf in Shayla's apartment. He showed up with his tools, and he fixed things, and Shayla, the woman who had been taught that showing up was the highest form of love, saw in Brandon everything she had been looking for. They married after 2 years of dating. The ceremony was at the Washington family's church, a small brick building on the north side of Tulsa that had been the center of the community for 40 years. Leon walked Shayla down the aisle in the only suit he owned, the same one he wore to every funeral and every wedding. Marie sat in the front row with all 4 of Shayla's siblings and cried so hard that Shayla's youngest sister had to hold her hand through the entire ceremony. Brandon's vows were simple and direct. He said, "I am not a man of many words, but I will show up every day. That is my promise." Shayla heard her mother's lesson echoed in his words, and she believed with everything she had that she had found the man who meant it. For the first 8 years, Brandon kept his promise. They settled in a small house in a quiet Tulsa neighborhood. They had 2 children. Their daughter, Nia, was now 9, a bright and sensitive girl who wrote poetry in a purple notebook she carried everywhere. Their son, Jalen, was 6, fearless and physical, the kind of boy who climbed everything and apologized for nothing. Shayla continued nursing. Brandon's HVAC career grew steadily, and he was promoted to a lead technician position that came with better pay and a company truck. They were not rich. They lived paycheck to paycheck some months. But they were stable, and they were together, and Shayla told herself that was enough. Then, about 2 years before the Family Feud taping, Brandon stopped showing up, not physically. He still came home, he still sat at the dinner table, he still slept in the same bed. But something fundamental had shifted. He became distant in a way that Shayla could feel but could not name. He stopped asking about her day. He stopped fixing things around the house without being asked. He picked up his phone every time it buzzed and left the room to respond. He started taking weekend service calls that Shayla could not verify, and when she asked about them, he gave answers that were vague enough to be true and specific enough to sound convincing. Shayla noticed everything. She was a nurse. She was trained to observe changes in patients, subtle shifts in behavior that indicated something underneath the surface was wrong, and the changes in Brandon set off every alarm she had, but she did not act on them. She told herself she was being paranoid. She told herself that a man who fixes things does not break his own family. She told herself that if she just kept showing up, kept being the wife and mother she had always been, whatever was wrong would fix itself. It did not fix itself. 3 months before the taping, Shayla found a receipt in the pocket of Brandon's work pants while doing laundry. It was from a jewelry store in Broken Arrow, a suburb of Tulsa. The purchase was a gold bracelet, $480. Shayla had never received a gold bracelet from Brandon. She had never seen one in their house. She held that receipt in the laundry room for 10 minutes, standing perfectly still, the washer running behind her, and felt the last 2 years of doubt crystallize into a single, undeniable conclusion. The man who fixed things had broken the most important thing he had. Shayla told her older brother, Deshaun, and her mother, Marie. She did not tell anyone else. Marie held Shayla's face in her hands and said, "Baby, love is showing up. And if he is not showing up for you, then what he is doing is not love. It does not matter what he calls it." Deshaun, who had always been protective of his sisters, wanted to confront Brandon immediately. Shayla asked him to wait. She was not ready. She needed to choose her moment. She needed the courage to arrive on its own schedule. The Family Feud appearance was organized by Shayla's coworker, Tanya, who had applied months earlier as a team from the rehabilitation center. The team was Brandon, Shayla, Tanya, Deshaun, and Marie, who was now 61 and had agreed to come because being on television sounded like an adventure and because she wanted to see California. Shayla packed the jewelry store receipt in her purse, alongside her lip gloss and her phone. She did not know if she would use it. She did not have a plan. She just knew she wanted it close, just in case the courage arrived. The Washington team was matched against the Adiemi family from Houston, Texas, a Nigerian-American family of 5 whose patriarch was a retired professor of engineering who answered every question like it was a thesis defense. The contrast between the academic precision of the Adiemis and the working-class warmth of the Washingtons made for excellent television. Steve Harvey connected with both families immediately. During introductions, Brandon delivered a line that would become painful in hindsight. "Steve, this is my wife Shayla. 10 years of marriage. She takes care of everybody. Patients, kids, me, her whole family. She never stops, and I just try to keep up." He put his arm around her. The audience applauded. Shayla leaned into him, and for a moment, she almost believed it. Almost. Marie stood at the end of the lineup, watching her daughter and son-in-law with the quiet, unblinking attention of a woman who had spent 30 years reading the faces of elderly patients who could not always tell you what was wrong. Marie saw something. She did not say anything. She did not need to. Her eyes said it. The game moved through the first 2 rounds without incident. The Washingtons won 1 and lost 1. Brandon was solid and likable. Shayla gave sharp, confident answers. Tanya was animated and fun. Deshawn was competitive and loud. Marie, when her turn came, delivered her answer with a calm certainty that earned her a round of applause from the audience. Everything appeared normal. Then came the 3rd round. Steve read the question. We asked 100 married women, name a gift that would make you suspicious if your husband gave it to someone else. Shayla was up for the face, off against the Adiemi daughter. Both women reached for the buzzer. Shayla hit it first. She opened her mouth to give a game answer. The word, perfume, was right there, ready to come out. It was a safe answer, a normal answer, the kind of answer that would keep everything exactly as it was. But in that half-second pause between the buzzer and her voice, something happened inside Shayla Washington. The courage arrived. It did not knock politely. It did not wait for an invitation. It arrived the way courage always does, sudden and absolute, like a door being kicked open from the inside. And instead of saying perfume, Shayla reached into her purse, which was tucked behind the podium, and pulled out the jewelry store receipt. She held it up. Not dramatically, not like a weapon. She held it up the way a nurse holds up a chart, factually, clinically. Here is the evidence. Here is what is happening. A gold bracelet, Shayla said, $480, from the jewelry store in Broken Arrow. Purchased 6 weeks ago. I found this receipt in his work pants. I have never received a gold bracelet from my husband. So the question is not whether it would make me suspicious. The question is who he bought it for. Because it was not for me. The studio detonated. 200 people erupted simultaneously. Gasps, shouts, hands pressed to mouths, people grabbing each other's arms. The Adiemi professor's eyes went wide behind his glasses. Steve Harvey's card slipped from his fingers and hit the podium with a sound that the microphones caught like a punctuation mark. Brandon stood in the family lineup, and what happened to his face in the next 3 seconds was captured by cameras from 2 different angles and would eventually be viewed by over 100 million people. It went from relaxed to confused to horrified in a progression so rapid it looked like a time lapse of a man's entire world collapsing. Shayla, what are you doing? Brandon said, his voice cracking. That is a work thing. I bought that for a client's wife. It was a thank you gift. Baby, come on. Not here. Shayla did not look at him. She looked at Steve Harvey. And she said with the steady, measured voice of a woman who had spent 2 years watching and 3 months carrying a receipt in silence, his company does not buy $480 bracelets for clients' wives, Steve. I called. They do not have a gift budget. They do not have a client appreciation program. He paid for it with his personal debit card. I checked the bank statement. It is the same card we use for groceries and our children's school supplies. My daughter needed new shoes last month, and he told me we had to wait until payday. But he had $480 for a gold bracelet that never came home. The second wave of reaction from the audience was even louder than the first. It was not just shock anymore. It was recognition. The detail about the daughter's shoes hit differently. It moved the betrayal from abstract to concrete. This was not just a man buying jewelry for another woman. This was a man telling his wife they could not afford their daughter's shoes while spending nearly $500 on a gift for someone else. The audience felt that. You could see it on their faces. Deshawn stepped forward from the lineup. His jaw was set so tight the muscles were visible. He did not say a word to Brandon. He simply moved to stand beside his sister, his physical presence a wall of protection that required no explanation. Marie had not moved from her position at the end of the lineup. But her eyes were locked on Brandon, and the look on her face was the look of a woman who had known for a long time that this day was coming and had prayed it would not. Steve Harvey stood at his podium. He had not spoken since the receipt came out. He had watched the entire exchange unfold with an expression that moved through surprise, sadness, and finally a deep, settled gravity. He looked at the receipt still in Shayla's hand. He looked at Brandon. He looked at Shayla. Then he pulled his earpiece out slowly and set it on the podium. "We are stopping," he said quietly. "The game is done." Steve walked to center stage. He moved slowly and deliberately, giving the room time to settle into the gravity of what had just happened. When he stopped, he spoke to Shayla first. "Shayla, I want to tell you what I just saw, because I think you need to hear it from someone outside of this situation. I just watched a woman pull a receipt out of her purse on a game show stage." That sounds simple. But it was not simple. It was the bravest thing I have seen in a very long time. Because that receipt has been in your purse for weeks. You have been carrying it around with you, going to work, taking care of your patients, picking up your kids from school, cooking dinner, lying next to that man at night, all with that piece of paper in your bag. You have been carrying the proof of his betrayal alongside your lip gloss and your car keys, waiting for the moment you were ready. And tonight, on my stage, you were ready. Shayla's eyes filled with tears for the first time. She pressed the receipt against her chest, almost instinctively, the way a person holds something that is both precious and painful. Tanya moved to her side and put her arm around her. Deshaun stood behind them like a guard post. Then Steve turned to Brandon. "Brandon, I heard what you said during introductions. You said your wife takes care of everybody and that you just try to keep up. Well, let me tell you what I observed. Your wife takes care of stroke patients 12 hours a day. She comes home and takes care of your children. She does your laundry, which is how she found this receipt in the first place. She manages your household on a budget so tight that your daughter had to wait for new shoes. And while she was doing all of that, while she was showing up every single day for you and your family the way her mother taught her, you took $480 that should have gone toward your family and spent it on a gold bracelet for another woman." Steve stepped closer. "But here is what really got me, Brandon. Your daughter needed shoes. Your wife told you about it. And you said wait until payday. You looked at the mother of your children and told her there was not enough money for shoes. And there was not enough money because you had already spent it on jewelry for someone who is not your wife. Do you understand what that means? It means your daughter went without so your secret could have something shiny. That is not an affair, Brandon. That is a theft. You stole from your own child." The audience erupted. The applause was heavy and sustained. Several people were standing. A woman in the second row was crying openly. The Adiami professor was nodding slowly, his arms crossed, the nod of a man who recognized moral clarity when he saw it. Brandon tried to speak. "Shayla, I know I messed up. I know it looks bad. But it is not what you think. She is just a friend. The bracelet was—" Shayla raised her hand. One hand, the hand still holding the receipt. And Brandon stopped. "A friend," Shayla repeated. "A friend you spent $480 on while your daughter wore shoes with holes in them. A friend whose bracelet cost more than our grocery budget for 2 weeks. A friend you never mentioned to me. Not once. In 2 years." She paused and took a breath. "My mama told me that love is showing up. For 10 years I showed up. Every shift, every dinner, every load of laundry, every night lying awake wondering why you felt so far away even though you were right next to me. I showed up every single time. And while I was showing up, you were shopping for someone else with our daughter's shoe money." She held the receipt out in front of her and looked at it one last time. $480. That is what our marriage cost, Brandon. Not the affair, the bracelet. Because the bracelet told me something the affair never could. It told me that you looked at our budget, you saw that our daughter needed shoes, and you chose her over us anyway. You did not just cheat. You chose, and you chose wrong. The standing ovation was enormous. People were on their feet crying, clapping, some of them calling out words of support. Marie was standing at the end of the lineup with tears running down her face, but her back was straight and her chin was up because her daughter had just spoken the truth and spoken it beautifully, and that was all a mother could ever ask for. Steve Harvey was visibly shaken. He pressed his hand to his forehead, took a breath, and turned to the camera. "I almost walked off my own stage just now. Not because I was upset with anyone, because what I just heard broke something inside me. A woman stood at my podium and held up a receipt and told this country that her daughter went without shoes so her husband could buy a bracelet for another woman. I have heard a lot of painful things on this stage, But I have never heard anything that hit me as hard as that, because it was not about the affair. It was about the choice. He chose. Every time we spend money, we are making a choice about what matters, and Brandon chose a gold bracelet over his daughter's shoes. That is not a mistake. That is a priority, and his priority was not his family. He continued, his voice thicker now. But I also need to say this. Shayla Washington carried that receipt in her purse for weeks. She went to work every day. She cared for her patients. She raised her children. She did everything she has always done. And tonight, she decided she was done carrying it alone. Her mother told her that love is showing up. And Shayla showed up tonight, not for Brandon, for herself, for her daughter who needed shoes, for every woman who has ever sacrificed her own needs so someone else could have something they did not deserve. Shayla showed up, and she showed out. And I am honored I was standing here when she did. The game was never completed. Both families received their full prizes and compensation. The Adeyemi family patriarch approached Shayla backstage and said, with the formal courtesy of a retired professor, "Madam, in my culture, a woman who speaks the truth in the face of injustice is honored. You honored yourself tonight. And you honored your mother, who clearly raised a remarkable woman." Marie, standing nearby, heard the comment and had to sit down because her knees gave out from the emotion. When the episode aired 6 weeks later, it became one of the most impactful Family Feud episodes ever produced. The clip of Shayla holding up the receipt was viewed over 100 million times within the first 3 weeks. But the detail that lodged itself most deeply in the public consciousness was the daughter's shoes. That single detail transformed the story from a tale of infidelity into a story about priorities and sacrifice. People shared the clip with captions like, "He told his daughter to wait for shoes while he bought a bracelet for another woman," and $480 told her everything. The shoes became a symbol. They represented every time a family member went without so that someone could fund a lie. The response was immediate and deeply personal. Thousands of women shared their own versions of the shoes story. Women who had been told there was no money for groceries while their husbands spent freely on hidden relationships. Women who had skipped doctor's appointments because the budget was tight, only to discover that the budget was tight because money was being diverted to someone else. Shayla's story gave them language for something they had felt but could not articulate. The betrayal was not just emotional. It was financial. It was the theft of resources that belonged to the family, and the receipt was the proof. Shayla returned to Tulsa and went back to work at the rehabilitation center. She filed for divorce within a month. The proceedings were handled through mediation, and the jewelry store receipt was entered as documentation of financial misconduct. Her attorney later said it was one of the most straightforward cases she had ever handled. Shayla came in with the receipt, the bank statement, and a timeline. The attorney said, "She had done the work. All I had to do was file the paperwork." Marie gave one interview after the episode aired. A local Tulsa news reporter asked her what it was like watching her daughter on that stage. Marie sat on her living room couch, wearing the same house dress she wore to see her patients, and said, "I taught my children that love is showing up." Shayla showed up for that man for 10 years. She showed up when she was tired. She showed up when she was hurt. She showed up when she suspected something was wrong and did not want to believe it. And then she showed up one more time, on that stage, and she showed the whole world who she is. Not a victim, not a fool, a woman who showed up with the truth. I could not be prouder. Brandon left the family home and moved to an apartment on the other side of Tulsa. He did not make a public statement. People close to the family said he was remorseful, but that his remorse came too late to save the marriage. He maintained regular visits with Naya and Jalen. Shayla, consistent with the kind of person she had always been, never prevented the children from seeing their father. She told her brother Deshaun, "The children did not do anything wrong. They love their daddy. My feelings about Brandon are separate from their relationship with him. I am going to keep those things in different rooms." That is the grown-up thing to do. Nia, Shayla's 9-year-old daughter, the one who wrote poetry in a purple notebook, wrote a poem a few months after the episode that Shayla found tucked between the pages. The poem was called "New Shoes," and it was 4 lines long. Shayla never shared the full poem publicly, but she told a friend that it was about how sometimes the things you have to wait for end up meaning more than the things that come easily. Shayla said reading it was the moment she knew her daughter was going to be okay. She is processing it the same way I process things, Shayla said. Through words, through observation, through making something beautiful out of something hard. She got that from me, and I got it from my mama. Steve Harvey spoke about the Washington episode at numerous events. At a community service awards ceremony, he said, "I have given thousands of speeches in my career. I have written books. I have delivered punchlines that made arenas full of people laugh. But the most powerful sentence I have ever heard was not a joke. It was a woman named Shayla standing at my podium saying her daughter went without shoes so her husband could buy a gold bracelet for another woman. That one sentence carried more truth, more pain, and more moral clarity than anything I have ever written. It reminded me that the most important stories in the world are not told by entertainers. They are told by mothers holding receipts." Leon, Shayla's father, the bus driver who had driven the same route for 28 years, did not give interviews or make public comments. But Shayla told a friend that her father called her the night the episode aired and said just 4 words. "You showed up, baby." Shayla said those 4 words in her father's steady voice meant more to her than anything else anyone said about the episode. Because showing up was the Washington family's highest praise. And she had earned it. 6 months after the episode, Shayla started a small initiative through her church called Shoes First. The program collected gently used children's shoes and distributed them to families in the Tulsa area who were struggling financially. The program's tagline was simple: "Every child deserves shoes before anyone else gets jewelry." The initiative grew quickly, fueled by donations from people across the country who had seen the episode and wanted to help. Within its first year, Shoes First had distributed over 3,000 pairs of shoes to children in need. Shayla ran it on Saturday mornings with help from her co-workers, her siblings, and Marie, who sorted shoes at a folding table in the church parking lot and told every child who came through the line the same thing: "Baby, you deserve these. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise." 1 year after the episode, Family Feud invited Shayla back for a special update segment. She walked onto the stage to a standing ovation that lasted over a minute. She wore a simple white blouse and a new gold chain that Marie had given her for her birthday, engraved on the back with 3 words, "Love shows up." Beside her, in the front row, sat Nia and Jalen, both wearing brand new shoes. Steve hugged her and asked how she was. Shayla smiled, a real unburdened complete smile. "Steve, I am showing up. Every day. For my patients. For my kids. For myself. I am not carrying anyone else's receipts in my purse anymore. The only thing in my bag now is my lip gloss, my keys, and the knowledge that I deserve better, and my daughter has new shoes. Real nice ones. She picked them out herself." Steve laughed, the warm and genuine laugh of a man who was watching someone heal. "Shayla Washington, you walked onto my stage with a receipt, and you changed the way this country talks about betrayal. You showed us that it is not just about who he was with. It is about what he took from you to be with her, and a $480 bracelet was not the most expensive thing he spent. The most expensive thing was your trust. But you got it back, not from him, from yourself, and that is worth more than any bracelet in any store on this earth." The story of Shayla Washington and the receipt from Broken Arrow endured as one of the most referenced Family Feud moments of the decade. Not because of the affair, which was tragically common, but because of the shoes. Because a 9-year-old girl waited for new shoes while her father spent the money on someone else. That image, that simple, devastating image, cut through every argument about privacy and boundaries and when it is appropriate to confront someone. It cut through because it was a child, and a child's needs, being sacrificed for an adult's secret, was something that no reasonable person could defend. Shayla understood that. She held up a receipt and she changed the conversation. And somewhere in Tulsa on a Saturday morning, she is still showing up, sorting shoes, handing them to children, telling each one they deserve something good. Because that is what love looks like. Love shows up. If this story reminded you that love is not a word but an action, that showing up matters more than any promise, and that every child deserves to come first, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel and turn on that notification bell so you never miss another story like this one. We bring you the most incredible and emotional Family Feud moments every single week. Real families, real sacrifices, and real courage. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.